Hi, I'm in Jerusalem right now in a wonderful place called Mishkenot Shananim, and it's mind-boggling, this whole online teaching thing. So I hope it's going to be great. I want to talk tonight about one of the more complex, more intriguing, and more fantasy-laden characters and stories of the Bible, and about certain stories that were then told about this character in the Midrash, Talmud, and even in the Islamic Quran. Our protagonist is Joseph, and he is one of the few men in the Bible that are described as very good looking. Now, in a book like the Bible, this is not something that's just mentioned in passing. The Bible has no fillers. It doesn't have any fluff. It's a very, very precise text. And if someone's exterior beauty is mentioned, it means it's of significance. It's not a minor detail. Otherwise, why talk about someone's looks? Who cares? Person. Let's go to the English version of Genesis 37. Let's go down a little and read what the pre-assumptions of the character are. Lily, can you roll us down to English of 37? Lily? Hello? I don't see 37.
You can just click on
now it's good.
Text, yes.
Okay. I would ask somebody with a better accent than I to read, but I can't do this here, so you'll have to just hear it from me. Let's go to verse 2. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. The rabbis say that the fact that these are the generations of Jacob, and then the Bible leaps to start talking about Joseph, means a lot. Joseph is one of the special lineage of the chosen ones. Jacob knows all about it because he too is a carrier of this lineage. If you will, a victim of it almost. This lineage of chosen ones removes the carrier from regular human fate and makes them into a link between heaven and earth. And Joseph is very clearly that. From the beginning of his life, Joseph has a special status in the world. Let's roll the page down, please. Let's expose the second part of the. Now, look at verse 3, and all the tragedy of this entire tale is told us in this verse. Now Israel is the name of Yaakov, of Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Imagine this. There are 11 sons by then. Joseph is number 11. He is, of course, the son of the loved wife, Rachel. And he is, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Ruby Namdar, writer of fiction, Israeli, writing Hebrew, living in America. Joseph, from his birth, carries the privilege and burden of his father's love. Now, the love of a father like Jacob it's bad enough that the father loves a son more than others and makes it very clear by making him a special garment, the garment of the chosen ones. In the case of Jacob, it is more important because Jacob comes from a special lineage of people with a promise. So this family lives its life like it is already part of history because of the promises made to Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov. So when the father loves a special son, it means that this son is not just more loved, but he's probably spiritually higher than everyone else. He's closer to God because this is God's chosen family. So that's a very complex relationship that the siblings, the brothers, have to Joseph. Because it is not only the love of the father, but it seems like Joseph is loved by God more than them. They are humans. Joseph is a chosen human. He's a man with a destiny. And he wears his destiny like his coat of many colors. I want to talk for a second about the coat of many colors. Today we live in an age where clothes are mass produced. Colors are abundant. Actually, clothes that are too colorful are tacky. This happens in a time where there's very little color in the world. There's very little silk. There's very little dyed wool. These are very expensive things. People wear rough garments, especially in a godforsaken province like Canaan. It's not an empire. It's some small place somewhere. When a boy walks around shining like a beautiful tulip because his father dressed him in a coat of many colors, he actually looks divine. And as you see in verse 5, he also has dreams. His dreams separate him from the rest of his siblings and the rest of humanity. And his brothers hate him for his dreams. Much like people hate artists or hate people with imagination because they pine for them, but they're also envious of them. Here's the young brother who needs to know his place at the end of the line, dreaming, and we're not going to go through all these dreams right now, but basically the dreams are that the sheaves of standing in the field, 11 sheaves bow to his, and that he is one of the stars, and the sun, the moon, and the rest of the stars bow to him. The dreams are dreams of chosenness, meaning my karma is higher than your karma. Now his brothers interpret it differently. You're going to have dominion, verse 8, over us? What, you think you're going to be the boss of us because of that? Because they think in earthly terms. I don't know what Joseph thinks. Because there's a certain element of and almost obliviousness about him. Because when he walks around telling these dreams to everyone, what does he think is going to happen? And we all know, I assume we know what happened. One day he goes visiting them in the field. He used to go, by the way, he was a tattletale. He used to go see wrong things that the brothers did and come back home to report them to his father, which, let's say, did not endear him to them further. He went to visit them in the field, as they saw it and probably as was happening, to spy on them. And when they see him, they talk to each other and say, oh, look, it's the dreamer here. The dreamer is back. Let's get rid of him. Let's go down all the way. Come, verse 20. Come now thereof, let's slay him and cast him into some pit. But his older brother Reuben said, no, let's just put him in the pit. He was hoping perhaps to save him. Verse number 23. He was stripped of his coat, the sign of the beloved boy, the sign of the chosen. They threw him into the pit, and they sat down to eat. And then a, a caravan of Ishmaelites, people from Arabia, came passing through the land of the Negev, carrying spicery and balm and myrrh, expensive stuff, down to Egypt, the great empire. And Judah said to his brother, let's sell him to them. Let's sell him to slavery. And they do. All this I assume people know, but it's good too. Because the main story, let's go down to the next chapter. Let's go down and see what happens when he was brought. He sold him to the Ishmaelites, and suddenly, in a few hours, the young prince of Israel, the chosen boy who was the apple of his father's eye, is sold to slavery. He's a man with no rights, with no autonomy over his body, over his life, over his biography. He's a thing, he's an object that is sold. The Talmud said that this, of course, was the assumption was he's sold to sexual slavery. He was supposed to be someone's sex slave. Let's go to the next chapter. That's when the great attempted seduction, the heart of our class today, is happening. Let's go down. While we do it, we'll just say that the brothers stained his coat with the blood of the goat they slaughtered for dinner, and they bring it to his father, and the father is devastated and grieves for his son for 17 years from there on. Terrible tragedy for this father. And Joseph, now Genesis 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt. And Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down. Something about this translation is wrong. The Hebrew does not say officer. It says the eunuch. At this time, high officials at court were often castrated themselves in order to win this position. And it was a known practice. So Potiphar has a certain hint of sexual inadequacy. The Talmud said that he actually was castrated by the archangel Gabriel, because he knew he had designs on Joseph, that he basically wanted to rape his Hebrew sex slave. And in order to preserve the purity of this divine boy, the angel castrated him. And immediately, let's go down. And Joseph arrives, and what happens to him is what happens to him everywhere he goes. This chosenness that we talk about, which is very hard to define, translates itself into a blessing. He spreads blessing around him. Happens to him everywhere he goes. This is something that God promised Abraham, that he shall be a blessing. That means that his presence alone becomes kind of a vessel that brings down divine grace into the world. So Joseph walks in and he brings beauty and divinity and prosperity with him. How can you not fall in love with him? And that's exactly what happens. The wife of the master, in this story, mind you, she has no name. She is the wife of Potiphar, the master's wife. Sees the beauty of the Hebrew boy, and she desires him. In other traditions, such as the Islamic tradition, especially the Sufi tradition, they say that it wasn't just crude sexual desire, that she fell in love with him madly. A Sufi poet, Persian Sufi poet named Jami, actually wrote a whole epic love story, love poem about them, saying that they were bashert, they were meant for each other in heaven. They were the true love, a tragic love tale because it could never happen. A slave and a mistress, a Hebrew and an Egyptian, chosen, a man chosen for divine destiny, and a woman from another nation. So that this story here that we see perhaps even as a farce in the Bible, as the wife, the older wife, lusting over this pretty boy, is actually translated a romantic tragedy. And the Quran gives the Islamic Quran gives the Potiphar's name a name. Her name is Zulaika. She's given a name and an identity, and she's considered a hero, especially among the Sufis, because she went after her heart. She becomes the symbol of a believer that out of the passion and love for divinity loses everything, throws everything, casts everything aside for the quest, the spiritual quest. She risks and loses everything. So Joseph comes, and by now his status is pretty high. And she casts her eyes upon him and she says, "Lie with me. Come lie with me." And then one day, when nobody is in the house, she comes to him, tries to seduce him, and grabs his clothes and tries to pull him to her. And he runs away, leaving his garment with her. Then she uses it in her anger and hurt, and maybe to protect herself. She uses this garment that she has of him as a testimony that he tried to rape her, and her husband throws him into prison, where his biography is going to take off from there. I just wanted to notice the interesting parallel here between his coat that his brothers took and showed his father as a sign that he's dead, and his coat that his master's wife shows his master as a sign that he's a rapist. Maybe both of them refer to his external. People are holding on to his external instead of seeing the inner kernel of divinity in him. People look at the mask, such as the clothes. Now I would like to go to a pretty radical study of this very well-known story. In the Bible, it seems pretty flat. Joseph is righteous. The master's wife is trying to use her power. She has all the power, he has none. And she tries to seduce him. He is too pious and too loyal to say no, to say yes, and therefore she takes revenge by throwing him into jail. Let's go down, please, and see, first of all, a very beautiful description in Midrash Tanhuma. Can we go there? A little further down. Okay. Midrash Tanhuma. Let's go down a little more. Midrash Tanhuma is sympathetic to the wife, to the Egyptian wife. At least that's how I read it. This story, by the way, traveled into the Quran. So the Quranic tale of Joseph is based on this Midrash. If you open the Quran in the story of Joseph, you will see this, the Hadith actually, the apocryphic tales, you will see this story. Can we go down a little more to the English version of Tanhuma? I can't scroll it down. Okay. Oh. I cannot scroll the Midrash down. Oh, thank you. A rabbi taught, once the Egyptian women, the Egyptian aristocracy, gathered to behold the beauty of Joseph, what did the wife of Potiphar do, his master's wife? She gave each one of them a citron, a fruit, and a knife to peel the fruit with. Listen to this. Look, try to imagine the beauty. Look at the details of court life. These aristocratic bored housewives of Ramses are sitting together, peeling expensive fruits with silver knives and toying with the beautiful Hebrew boy. She then called for Joseph and made him stand before them. She said, Joseph, can you come here a minute? Stand here. Tell us a story. And as the women, were gazing at Joseph's beauty, they all cut their fingers instead of the fruit. They were so distracted, they were so stunned by his beauty that they all cut their fingers. She then said to them, you were subjected to this beauty for only 1 hour, for a minute. I just called him in. But I must endure it every day. Imagine my life. Now, all this, until now, we see Joseph as a passive recipient of this passion. But this doesn't make sense. And the Talmud, that loves to celebrate the piety of Joseph, also says other things about Joseph. Thank you. First of all, we're not going to go up there, but before that, Midrash Rabbah says that Joseph was in the habit of, doing his hair and putting makeup on, as the pretty boys used to do, and metaleh be'akevav, kind of walk funny. He was a flirt. That's Midrash Rabbah, saying that Joseph was actually teasing the woman. That's a very brave thing to say, because conventionally Joseph is considered a hero of the faith. His overcoming this seduction is considered a grand deed. But the Talmud takes off this mask and says, no, there's another side to it. Joseph was also human. Let's go to the Talmud. Thank you. A little down. A little down. A little further down so we can get to the English. Thank you. Okay. This Talmud, this piece of Talmud is from Tractate Sotah. Tractate Sotah is a famous tractate dealing with adultery. Now, usually it speaks of adulterous women, but notice what's happening. Rabbi Chana ben Bizna sent in the name of Rabbi Simon the Pious, Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik, mind you, a very pious man, tell this story. I think a man less known for his piety than Shimon HaTzadik may not have had the courage to tell this story. Because Joseph sanctified the heavenly name in private, one letter was added to his name. It says Yehosef, Edut BeYosef. Because Judah sanctified the name of heaven in public, his whole name was called after the name of the Holy One, Hashem. Let's go down. How was it? How was it with Joseph? Okay. A little further up. Sorry. Excellent. A little further up. Sorry. A little further up. I'm sorry. No, up. Oh my God. Okay, there you go.
Do you want the Hebrew or the English?
No, the English. I'm sorry, the English. If we're going to read the Hebrew, we're never going to finish. Okay. And it came to pass about this time that he went into the, let's go down. Good. Into the house to do his work. Rabbi Yochanan said, this teaches us that both Joseph and Potiphar's wife had, listen to this, this is a bomb. This is a grenade thrown into our room. Had the intention of acting immorally. Again, if I cannot emphasize enough what a beautifully radical moment this is, because the entire persona of Joseph in the rabbinic world is Joseph the pious, Joseph the righteous. Why is he so righteous? Because he was 17 in the heat of his erotic whatever, and this beautiful Egyptian aristocratic woman tried to seduce him and he said no. And here comes Rabbi Yochanan, who knew all about seduction, and says, no, he did. He actually went into the house. Why would he walk into the house alone with a married woman had he not planning to do something funny? So this is a very important moment. Again, I cannot emphasize the gravity of this yet. And this is why I love the Talmud. The Talmud is very irreverent, even about its own heroes of faith. There is nothing self-righteous about the Bible or the Talmud. Nothing. Rav Shmuel differ in this interpretation. Rav and Shmuel, they're two scholars that come much later. One said that it really means to do his work, but the other said he went to satisfy his desires. He went to work on her, not to work for her. So this is, again, there's a whole school of thought that says that Joseph perhaps was not so righteous, that he was much closer to temptation than we would like to attribute. And there was none of the men of the house. Is it possible that there was no man in a huge house like the one of the wicked Potiphar? So it was taught in the school of Rabbi Ishmael that was their fast day. In another place it says that was the holiday of the Nile. The Nile was a god. The river Nile was revered as a god. It was the day of the Nile. And everybody, all the idol worshipping staff of the house, all the servants and the master went to the idol worship. But she has pretended to be ill. She pretended to be sick because she said, I shall not have another opportunity like this ever. It's now or never. This is my only day. Joseph is not going to go to worship idols because he's a Hebrew. They believe in one God. They're weird this way. So this is my day. So according to the school of Rabbi Ishmael, she is a predator and he's the prey, right? And she caught him by his garment, etc. At that moment, his father's image. Now listen to this, psychoanalysts amongst us. And without mentioning, we move to the other school that says he actually was able and willing, maybe very able and very willing. But when it came to that, he suddenly saw, think of what a castrating image. He saw the image of his righteous father, the one father that loved him more than everyone else, the father that represents God, divinity, the superego. The image of his father appeared in the window and said, Joseph, thy brothers will have their names inscribed upon the stones of the ephod, the breastplate of the high priest where all the tribes of Israel were counted. Holy tribes named after holy men, and dying amongst them. Is thy wish to have your name expunged from among theirs, and it become, instead of calling you a shepherd, they will call you an associate of harlots? So the father appears to him as his lust, was about to overcome him, and ruins it for him. Immediately go down a line. His bow abode in strength, meaning he lost it. He lost his erection, he lost his manhood. And when they said there was no man in the house, there was not a man in the house. So some of the rabbis here say it's because he lost his manhood. He couldn't do it. He couldn't rise to the occasion, so to speak. What happened here? Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Meir that his passion subsided and the arms of his hand were made active. Listen to this. He stuck, this is a crazy description. Only the Talmud can do that. He stuck his hands in the ground, so his lust came out from between his fingernails. This is a crazy description. He basically threw himself, grabbed his, and came in his fingers. So he won't sin with this woman. So they are not going for the kind of placard piety thing. The rabbis are describing a dynamic of seduction that comes both ways. Joseph is active. He goes there. He knows what he's doing. According to Midrash Rabbah, he teased the poor woman mercilessly before he went. And then some of the rabbis says he lost his masculinity, his whatever, erection, once he saw his father's face in the window. And according to the other story that's woven in here, he did not lose it. He just did something else with it. In the last minute, he grabbed himself. And he did not consummate. He did it in his hands. And again, if someone is steeped into the world of the rabbinic literature, the spilling of seed in a way that's not appropriate is considered a very big thing. So he does it's almost an act of self-sacrifice. I mean, this is the man who carries the great lineage of Jacob and Israel. Every sperm cell is counted. He is, the seed that is many as the stars. Every seed counts. These are souls, if you want to go Kabbalistic. Each sperm is a soul in the world, and so on. So here comes a man, a boy, at the heat of his erotic, self, and goes into this erotic misadventure. And it's a good question. Is this considered piety, or is it considered a tainted piety? And the Talmud kind of hints both ways, because it goes down further and says, look at this line saying, Joseph was worthy. It was taught. Joseph was worthy that 12 tribes should issue from him his loins, as they issued from his father Jacob. The fact that Joseph had only 2 sons. He should have had 12 like the 12 tribes of Israel. He was as great as his father, if not greater spiritually. He was to be the real father of the nation. But what happened? Because of this spilled seed, he was only given 2. It's as if he wasted, in order to overcome the temptation, he wasted 80% of his potential. So we have here, to wrap this crazy story up, we have here a very counterintuitive and for me a wonderfully intriguing story, because it brings together notions about beauty, eroticism, piety, masculinity, that are very counterintuitive to what we think today. Joseph's beauty, one of the few men that are described as very handsome, his arrogance, his obtuseness to his brothers, are all signs of his divinity, his chosenness. This is not what we think, that the meek shall inherit the earth. This is not a meek man. And at the same time, we are told that he is a pious, righteous man who went into a great trial of faith through his erotic appeal. And at the same time, by rabbis who are not in any way less pious and holy than the other rabbis, we are told that he actually walked in there in order to transgress. He came to the house knowing very well who's alone in the house. He was also looking for the opportunity. And it took the intervention of his super ego or his father's spirit, or however you want to call it, a last minute intervention to either just make the flesh weak so he couldn't perform the sin, or a more twistedly heroic deed of grabbing himself until he came in his hands and could not consummate it with this woman. So we have a very unusual tale. And I'm hoping that some of this is going to travel with you, because I think that there's a value in savoring and remembering this counterintuitive notion, because it puts a dent into our automatic instinct of thinking that it's all this kind of orthodox, pious, always follow the rules, always interpret according to canon. Here's the Talmud itself coming with the least orthodox interpretation of a story that's considered a triumph of faith. I see an interesting question here that I would love to talk about. One of our friends here asks, the Bible tells us that we're made in the image of God. So in this way, I guess we should all be considered beautiful. And if we're all made in the image of God, why is this man's beauty so important? So a Talmudic tale tells us about the beauty of Adam. Adam was the most beautiful human alive. Why? Because he was a reflection of the divine image. And the splendor of God is the basis for human beauty. But as Adam multiplied and was fruitful, more and more matter was added to the equation and less divinity. So with every generation that passed since the creation of Adam, we became less beautiful because we became more nature and less God. More mud, less divine breath. So the divine element in our looks has subsided. But few men who were very pious and holy retained a spark of the beauty of Adam. And these men, their physical beauty, their physical appearance, was considered a sign of their divinity and a hint, kind of almost like to look at them, at their beautiful faces, would be to meditate on the splendor of God. Again, this is a beautiful and counterintuitive idea. So when we're told about someone that they're beautiful, especially men, it's considered a peeping hole through which we could glance at God through divine beauty, because we were made in the image of God. I see another question. All beauty in the Bible and the Talmud always invites trouble and danger, because once you are, you fly higher, you're closer to divinity. You're also, the risks are bigger and the temptations are bigger. There is a serious division between male beauty and female beauty. Because Eve was a copy of the copy. Adam was a copy of the original, which is God. So he was the most beautiful. Eve was already second generation because she was made of Adam, not made of God. So Eve was considered to be less beautiful than Adam, and the essence of her beauty was more human, less divine. The division, we are told about beautiful women too. Beautiful women are mostly sexualized in the Bible and in the Talmud. Beautiful men are also sexualized, but they often are holy in spite of the temptation that their appearance creates. And it is, yes, it is not a politically correct feminist text. It is not. Thank God, because we know how to make these, but this is for us a rare gem that we can find. But I think it's a very interesting division, because we live in a world where female beauty is very much enhanced and talked about, and there's a whole industry. And we come from a culture that allocates two different roles to male beauty and female beauty, in which the male beauty is considered more a kind of pious beauty. And this is really, I think it's so wonderfully counterintuitive. So I'm not even angry. Even the feminist in me can't be angry. More questions, thoughts, exclamations, hallelujah, something. I hear a beautiful summary. The metaphor of coats as the skin. I think that's a good way to end this. That at the same time, the coats are only an appearance. It's not what's under them, but it is also what's under them. And the same thing about the skin deep beauty. Unlike what we expect from holy Orthodox books, both Bible and Talmud tell us that yes, beauty is skin deep, but it's also not. And the coat of many colors is on one hand just vanity, just a cloak, just a garment. It's not the real thing. But it also totally is the real thing. It captures the essence of Joseph. and the coat that his master's wife pulls from him. Maybe she unmasks the fact that he was ready to sin. She's pulling maybe the cloak of piety from him. So yes, the garments are like the skin, and it's this beautiful, complex paradox that yes, it doesn't mean anything, but it means everything. It's only exterior, but it's also totally interior. And the oxymoron, the paradox here is at the heart of this. More questions or thoughts? I'm happy to answer a few more questions if people have them. With pleasure. I see a new question. The connection is very slow because in Jerusalem. I think there's a question here. The question is interesting. It says there's a curious thing here. The father, Jacob, loves the man, the son, not the physical body of the boy. Is that a metaphor for divine love? It's a good question whether Jacob's love to Joseph comes from his prophetic divine part, or is it his human weakness? The Bible doesn't say that. We are left guessing. You know, like everybody else, Jacob is, you know, a holy man, but also a man with struggles and complexities. We our prophets are not placard prophets. They're not all good. They're always complex. This differs us from other religions that will remain unnamed. All of our saints are not saintly. They're complex and they're human, and there's a struggle within between the saint and the human. And it's a good question that is left open, whether Yaakov loved Joseph because he recognizes in him the kernel of divinity that he carries, and therefore loves him for his divine spark, or is it just the weakness of Jacob, that he just loves the boy because he looks like his mother, Rachel, Rachel, that Yaakov loved more than the mother of the Leah, which he hated, the mother of the rest of the boys. And I just want to, as a hint to that, we are told about Joseph's grandfather, Isaac, Yitzchak, that loved Esau, more than Jacob. So, was Esau really the chosen one, and Rebekah fooled the old man to make him bless her beloved, nerdy son? Or was this Yitzchak's weakness, the human part of him, where even he could not see who is really the chosen one? So with Yaakov and Joseph, we will never know. And both interpretations are intriguing, and they totally reinterpret the story, each one of the versions, and we will always be left guessing. There's not going to be an answer. More thoughts or questions? If we have no more, it was great. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful global learning day. This is a great privilege to be part of this. It's an amazing project. And next time we'll have hopefully a better connection. But I think this was a good night. Bye-bye.